How is Thomas Frank going to set up at Tottenham Hotspur? The beauty of it is that we don't actually know. We can take clues from how he's set up at Brentford, how he's evolved at Brentford. All of the best coaches adapt, and that is something that Thomas Frank has 100% done and has earned him a crack at the Tottenham Hotspur job. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe, make sure to like the video, make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm really excited to get into this video because Thomas Frank is a manager that I've been very hot on for a while now in terms of replacing Ange Postecoglou, and the more I dig deep into it, the more I watch Brentford, the more I've kind of researched for this video and taken my own thoughts from when I've watched them throughout the season. Quite a lot of our players in this squad profile quite nicely for what Thomas Frank wants to do. Now, Thomas Frank, for the most part last season at Brentford, set them up in a 4-2-3-1 shape. Home and away. 12 times at home, 11 times away. He did also revert to his 5 at the back system at times, but that was definitely more common in the 2023-2024 season, where he used it 20 times, setting up with Visser and Bowman when he was available as that front two. Obviously, Tony coming back into it when he was back from his suspension, etc. And I do feel like that is something that there's been it's kind of been shaken off a little bit now that Thomas Frank actually is the manager and the links have got hotter and people have had more time to adjust to it. But I think this idea that Thomas Frank plays negative, boring football because people remember Brentford for playing this 5 at the back in the first few years where they were adjusting to the league, trying to acclimatise and trying to survive, most importantly, which was the kind of sole objective of Brentford. But now I feel like Thomas Frank has really grown in confidence as a coach, and you're now seeing with Brentford last season a lot more of his core principles as a manager in terms of playing attacking, aggressive football come to the fore, and I'm really excited to see that translate to Tottenham. And I've got a line up here, and you can see that I've drawn the line between Bentancur and Bergvall. Thomas Frank plays with a double pivot. No more lone 6 at Tottenham. No more Basuma or Bentancur in that lone 6 with an 8 or 2 10s ahead of him. It's very much a double pivot setup with Norgard, Janelt, Yarmouk as well kind of coming in at times there being used. And I think the double pivot is something that really excites me in terms of some of the profiles that we've got. However, I think if we were to lose someone like Christian Romero, then it becomes a little bit more of a problem in terms of that ball progression. But we're going to come on to that a little bit later on. As you can see, I've got a few transfer targets down here as well that we can maybe kind of chuck in to this video. But I'm really, really excited to do this. And I'm really excited about Thomas Frank. So yeah, 4-2-3 when set up was Thomas Frank's bread and butter last season with Visser obviously up front. Damsgaard very much in a traditional number 10 role, and like I said, Norgard and Janelt or Norgard and Yarmouk as that kind of base of that midfield with a back four that, you know, we're not going to see Porro and Udogie taking up number 10 positions in build-up anymore. They are going to be used predominantly as traditional fullbacks. Now, we're going to talk about Frank's adaptability to go into a back 5 as well and how that actually suits the fullback profiles that we've got in the squad, but I'm very interested to see how they get on. Now, there's a lot of players that I'm incredibly excited for in this system, and Maddison is one of them, definitely in that number 10 role. But I kind of want to talk about before we kind of get into that and how Frank actually kind of sets the team up. I've got some examples that I kind of wanted to run through. Focusing a little bit on this double pivot, focusing on what the wingers do, and then how we can kind of apply that to Spurs as well. This is a goal that I really, really liked from last season that Brentford scored against Leicester at home. They completely dismantled them again. Leicester, obviously, poor quality of opposition, but Brentford were unstoppable at home during this period, whoever they kind of came up against. I remember them taking Newcastle apart. Taking other teams apart as well during this run where, you know, the G-Tech played such a brilliant part in colouring the story of the Premier League season last year. And Bowman, Visser, those early goals, everything. Brentford were just on fire, especially at home. And you can see here that Collins, and now Nathan Collins is a player that has actually been linked to Spurs in the last couple of days. Apparently Frank wants to bring him with him. I'm not sure whether that actually is the case or not. And I do think if we were to lose someone like Christian Romero, then I'm not sure Collins is an adept replacement in terms of the quality that Romero brings you on the ball. But if you were to bring him in for another squad option, say Dragusin, I'd 100% be all over that. And I actually think Collins is better on the ball than people give him credit for. But also, if we were to lose Romero, it does link to another area of recruitment that I think Spurs will need to focus on under Frank as well to get that ball progression, and we'll come back onto that. But this goal, I love it because you can see that double pivot working in tandem there. baiting Leicester onto them, drawing that press. And you can see Collins, the little cuteness on the ball, that little outside of the foot pass around Ayew, which frees up Sepp van den Berg in that attacking fullback role. And we will see at times a Spurs kind of set up a little bit more like this under Frank, where you have a doggy tucking in more as a natural left back, and then you're kind of getting this creativity from Porro and that ability to drive forward from Porro. And this kind of becomes your rest defence a little bit. That three and then the two in front of them, and Porro is able there to kind of drive forward and combine with Maddison. But the freedom that Maddison, I think, will get and benefit from with Thomas Frank is exactly what we see from Damsgaard here. You can see him all on his own. That ability to quickly just play quickly with that double pivot, adding that security, bringing two Leicester players forward with them, confident in their press, having a centre-back like that, like Romero, who is able to kind of just flick that ball lovely around the corner under pressure and just completely opens up the game into Damsgaard here. And you can see, just at the top of your picture, there's a spare man in Keane Lewis-Potter who has actually made that burst forward from left-back, because what Frank does tend to like to do is use these wingers, especially with Sharda. I've got Tell here as an example because I really think that Tell could explode under Frank. But of course, I think Son really suits this as well. Let's just move Tell over here. What he does like to do with Visser or Solanke, kind of dropping that little bit deeper, is have wingers make runs inside of the fullback, with the fullback kind of tending to go round to open up that space. And we also see with Keane Lewis-Potter kind of making runs into central areas, picking the ball up off the left-hand side. He is right-footed and tending to come in here as well. But I do think having a doggy and having Son or Tell and using them kind of as an inside forward with a striker that wants to drop a bit deeper is really good for Maddison, because it allows Tell or Son to kind of get into this central area because of the space that has opened up here with Keane Lewis-Potter kind of going around the outside. Damsgaard's got two really good options here, and with someone kind of getting over, distracted by the left wing back, or the left back in this case in Lewis-Potter, really interesting in how he was used. It opens up a pass to play that really lovely central ball through to your inside forward. Lovely goal from Brentford. And again here, we talk about Nathan Collins kind of stepping up. This is another thing that Brentford do really well, again with a striker dropping deeper in Visser, which I think will suit Solanke's game as well, with how Andrew's kind of used him this season as kind of a back-to-goal striker, linking play up. We saw Solanke's link-up play excellently in the first half of the season. You can see Visser here dropping that little bit deeper in this combination play with Collins, and Collins maraudering forward from the back almost a little bit. I had a conversation with Kish from Lily White Lab literally just now before we recorded this video, talking about it's almost quite Dyer-esque, Maguire-esque, that ability to drive up forward with the ball. And he plays a lovely through ball to Sharda. But look at how this happens. And I'll just hide my camera here so you can see this. Collins baits the press from Vardy, drives forward. And again, this is where maybe we could see Kevin Danso used quite well, I think, as well, in terms of his ability to drive forward from the back. Nice little combination play with Damsgaard. Lovely little through ball, and it's that first-time flick from Visser. And look at the ground that Collins has kind of made up to progress the ball. I really, really like it. We've also got some examples of how Brentford move the ball quickly through the lines, through the thirds. Visser, first-time ball to Mbeumo. Again, we're going to need to see that from Solanke. Quickly popping the ball off and then getting into the box, getting into those positions to convert those high XG chances. But also Mbeumo, who we have been linked with as well, who I don't think is going to happen. This killer instinct in the box to kind of cut inside and shoot. Again, Brentford's high pressing game at work here as well. We've got some stats to go into with the pressing, which I can actually get into now for you. They're not always necessarily. They're not always pressing high. It's kind of a balanced pressing approach from Thomas Frank. But you can see in terms of how effective the turnovers are. They had the sixth most turnovers in the Premier League in high areas of the pitch last season. 45 of them ending in a shot, and 6 of them, I think here, where are we? Brentford, 6 of them ending in a goal. So again, pretty decent from Brentford in terms of those turnovers. Let me just get that up for you there so you can see that graphic. Again here, high pressing against Southampton, quickly, effectively pouncing on that opportunity and scoring. One thing as well with Thomas Frank's game, which I'm going to come on to a little bit in a sec as well, is from set pieces, the danger from set pieces. And this is something that Tottenham despite improving in the second season of Ange Postecoglou, defensively and attacking-wise, set pieces were a bit of an issue for Spurs, mainly in terms of, I think, chance creation. But Brentford, so effective. And long throws are a big part of that. And Nathan Collins is a big part of that as well. Near post, little flick on there to Visser, who makes that run around the back. And that's where I want to talk about Nathan Collins a little bit as a potential signing, and also Luka Vuskovic. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But just a few more goals to get through here. I really enjoyed kind of going through all of Brentford's goals this morning. Again, you see this run from Yarmouk here. I think it's Yenalt, actually. That run from kind of deep as Brentford played through the thirds. Cutbacks, scoring goals in the centre of the pitch. I think only Brighton scored more goals within the centre of the penalty area last season. I think 71% of Brentford's goals. Or 71% of Brentford's shots, came from inside the centre of the box. A lot of them from kind of these cutback opportunities, and that's why Visser became such a brilliant XG monster, converting these high XG chances. Also overperforming on a lot of his XG as well, but such an effective first-time finisher. You can see Damsgaard here and the running behind from Sharda in this example of what Brentford do so well from an attacking point of view, and that's why I'm really excited for James Maddison. If I just quickly go back to Opta here, just quickly back to touch on the set pieces, the third most XG from set pieces in the league last season with 16.71, managing 143 shots from set pieces as well, which is obviously, it's crazy. Brentford's XG was 60.19, like I said, with 16.71 of those come from set pieces. Now, if we go to passing here and have a quick look, through balls, Brentford 69. But they were one of the best teams at progressing the ball forward quickly. They had the fourth best forward pass direction percentage in the league behind Palace, Bournemouth, Everton, or fifth, behind Forest, Everton, Bournemouth, and Palace. So they want to get the ball forward quickly with those through balls. And if I quickly pop onto here and look at the passing stats. And look at through balls, Mikkel Damsgaard had the second most in the league. And this is, again, somewhere where we've seen James Maddison thrive in that number 10 position or number 8 position for Spurs, playing those through balls between the lines to Richarlison or Son in that first season of Ange Ball, running onto it for those kind of cutback finishes for Sonny in the box. It was something that we saw him be super effective at. And also in terms of just chance creation, Mikkel Damsgaard, so important. You look at the Brentford players here in terms of the chances created, Damsgaard right up there and Bowman right up there as well. And also, one thing to note as well when you look at Brentford is that consistency of availability, which is something that, Frank has struggled with injuries in the past, but also it's something that we're gonna have to think about when it comes to building this squad and finding players that kind of replace these kind of profiles that Frank wants to use so well, especially now we're in the Champions League. But Mbeumo and Damsgaard played 38 games for Brentford last season, so obviously that inflates the chance creation numbers slightly, but they're just incredibly effective. Damsgaard, the fifth most assists in the league with 10 last season. I'll come back on to this in a second. But again, Damsgaard here in that number 10 role, ball into Sharda, first time cutback for Visser. Again, I think we're going to see, Tell potentially used quite well in that system, used as an inside forward, kind of making those runs in behind, and Maddison, that freedom that he gets in the 10 position, I really think that he could benefit from that. So let's kind of just set everyone back up here then, and we'll talk through some other little bits that I really like about Thomas Frank's kind of setup. I'm so intrigued to see who he kind of uses as a right winger with the options that we do have. It's worth remembering as well that Thomas Frank really wanted to sign Brennan Johnson at Forest, and it makes sense with the way they play. Can Brennan Johnson potentially be used on the left-hand side in that Sharda role as a squad option? I think he can. Obviously, Ange used him as a left-sided winger in his first season. Definitely not so much in the second season. But yeah, there's a lot to like and get into, and like I said, I think there's a lot of profiles that profile quite nicely in our squad for what he wants to do. Like I said, in terms of that ball progression from the centre backs, I'm really upset about the prospect of Romero potentially leaving under Frank, because I think it works so well. Because what you often see in build-up is, let me just move these midfielders forward. Let me just get rid of this line as well, actually. Just move everyone forward a little bit. You often see Collins kind of stepping up more than the other centre-half into this kind of position and playing balls quickly forward out to, let me just get my pen, using a different board again today, balls out to the winger. He does it quickly. Romero, Collins does it, steps up, quickly plays the ball through the lines into a winger, and then they can kind of run forward. And because we're not kind of inverting our fullbacks, we won't be inverting our fullbacks as much. Let me just get rid of this. Inverting our fullbacks as much, teams aren't going to sit. They're going to like teams under Ange ball, where we'd kind of maybe invert Porro and a doggy high at times. They'd kind of drop a lot of more men back to kind of prevent the threat, lock off the space. Whereas now teams will see that we're not doing that as much. We're a bit more cautious in that build-up, but we want to get the ball forward quickly under Thomas Frank. They might sit off a little bit more, but they're going to commit more men forward to try and win that ball back and press onto us. And then you create situations where you're kind of running 4v4 at a back line, which is where we've seen Mbeumo so effective, running directly at defenders. Like I said, the fullback's definitely more reserved in attack. And as I touched on earlier, with that goal, the goal against Leicester, you kind of see a stronger rest defence. You do see the right back, Sepp Vandenberg, allowed that freedom to go forward. Keane Lewis Potter, that freedom to go forward from left back or left wing back at times as well. But there was a much more solid rest defence, one with that double pivot, but also with one of the fullbacks kind of staying back, as we touched on earlier. A doggy, Keane Lewis Potter is a really interesting one actually, because like I said earlier, he does like to come in off that left-hand side and drive inside the pitch, but also we do see whoever plays at left-back for Brentford, whether it is him, whether it was Rico Henry, staying a little bit wider as well at times to kind of allow one of the midfielders to make the run in the channel, or make the inside forward in Sharda or Tell or Son in this case for Spurs kind of make those runs. One thing that Brentford tend to do out of possession as well, because we've obviously got to talk about the defensive structure, although we want to talk about the attacking stuff because it is really exciting, is that they do tend to defend in kind of a 4-4-2 shape, a little bit more narrow as well, when the team's kind of attacking onto them. So let's bring everybody in here. Quite often the number 10 that will kind of come out as this left midfielder, and then the left winger kind of as the striker. So what they tend to do is the opposition, they would like to funnel the balls out wide and encourage the opposition to get crosses in, because they know in someone like Nathan Collins, let me just get this up, in terms of aerial duels, Nathan Collins, the second most in the league last season, or the second most aerial duels in the league last season with 119, and also with the blocks, where's the blocks, most blocks, and also second most amount of clearances as well. They back the fact that they had strong box defenders, so they quite often like to funnel the ball out wide to encourage the options to get crosses in, because they know they're just going to get their head on them and get them away. That's where someone like a Kevin Danso comes into it. That's also where someone like a Vuskovic comes into it as well, if Romero does leave, or Collins potentially joins Tottenham. Dragusin as well definitely comes back into this as well with that, for sure. But the thing is about losing Romero, like I said, is that I think that's where if we move everybody back into their kind of positions, get Sonny out here, Maddison definitely in that 10, Johnson. And again, I'm not saying it's definitely going to be Johnson from the start, but I do think he'll like Johnson. Where you're losing in Romero, you're kind of losing that ability to progress the ball out from the back. You can replace that with someone like a Collins who's decent at it, but I think that's where maybe that deep line playmaker signing kind of has to come in to allow Spurs to move the ball through the thirds under Frank when you can't do it as effectively without Romero. So that becomes really important. A Wharton, a Belieber, someone like that who is also so solid defensively. Is that on the table for Spurs this season? Not necessarily. Let me know some shouts potentially for that position in the comments below, because it's definitely something that we're gonna obviously have to talk about. Also, speaking of midfielders, we've also got Pat Matasar. I think is an interesting one when you think about how Yarmouk has been used at times, or Janel in those kind of roles, making those runs in the channels late, progressing with the ball or progressing off the ball to get into attacking positions in the channels. We saw that with Sarr actually at Brentford last season, kind of making these sorts of runs into the channel, and we know he's like to do that a lot more under Ange. So I think that's where Sarr does come into this as well. And I think again, we need to add a lot of quality to this squad, but also there's players that profile quite nicely there and allow us to be quite versatile, I think, under Frank. What else to quickly talk about? Again, we've spoken about the double pivot in terms of how Brentford are able to progress quickly between the lines, and we spoke about that Leicester goal as an example. Also, again, that one thing that double pivot have to focus on from a defensive point of view when they do go back into that 4-4-2 shape is to stop those underlapping runs. And I think one game I remember them coming unstuck is against Liverpool, and I remember Frank talking about this actually in the Sky Sports Day in the Life where they analysed it. And Liverpool, they held out for so long against Liverpool. Liverpool had so many shots. Brentford was so defensively solid. They limited them to chances, but Brentford in the 90th minute conceded a goal where I think it was Trent just makes this really little clever run off the back of one of the midfielders into a space, cut back, and Darwin Núñez is able to score. So again, that concentration has to be so high, and that's maybe why I worry about some of the players. But again, I think with Frank coming in and instilling that discipline, I don't think it should be too much of an issue, but that's definitely something to watch out for. Go and watch that goal. I should have got a screenshot of it really, but I think people will remember the game when Núñez scored that brace in like the last minute. So we spoke about Sarr. We spoke about the runs that the attackers will want to make, staying high and wide and making kind of infield runs, which I think suits Son and Tel. It suits Johnson as well. And we spoke about Maddison in that Damsgaard role, kind of picking balls out in behind a back line. One player that I do want to talk about as well is Dominic Solanke in that kind of Wissa role. Wissa, an XG monster in and around the box, but also so selfless in his link-up play, his hold-up play, allowing the runners of Mbeumo or Johnson in this example to kind of get in behind and score. They love to get players in the box. So Solanke kind of dropping that little bit deeper, popping the ball off. Maddison, ball in behind. Son or Tel, cutback opportunity, or whether it comes from one of the fullbacks as well, cutback opportunity, and you've got players running in to score. Solanke can do that, but I do want him to kind of work on that ability to arrive in the box this year, because again, that was a similar principle to what Ange kind of did deploy, forcing cutback opportunities and scoring in the centre of the box, certainly in the first season of Ange ball as well. So I do want to see Solanke improve on that, because Wissa is so good at collecting the ball deep, popping it off and spinning and pacing it into the box to get on the end of something. So yeah, I think he'll use Solanke well, and I think he can work really well under Frank, but he does have to improve that box presence. I also like the idea of Tel as a number 9 under Frank at times as well. Where is he? Where is Matisse Tel gone? He's over here. Because I think when you do play quickly through the thirds, I think his ability to kind of drop deep and then make these runs in behind, we've seen him do that for France under 21s. He is a good finisher, and I think using him as an inside forward at first under Frank, if we do keep him, which I definitely think we should, and then kind of over time morphing him into this striker, I'm really excited to see his development. What else do we want to talk about? Again, Brentford's counter-pressing being super effective, and we've got the players to do that. They're not the most aggressive pressers in the league, but we spoke about their turnovers already in terms of that success. What they're so good as well with this double pivot is that when, say if they progress the ball through the thirds and a team is able to clear it, that double pivot do like to press up, and they are really good at kind of camping or pinning teams in their kind of own box, and winning that ball back and recycling it and go again. And because they've got the security of that double pivot as well, is that although these guys will push up, they'll still be cautious, and you're less likely to be vulnerable to turnovers as well, because you haven't got your fullbacks in here as well. You've got your centre-backs kind of staying that little bit deeper. It's a little bit of a lower defensive line, which again doesn't put as much stress on Van de Ven, doesn't put as much stress on Romero, and doesn't put as much stress on the fullbacks who were so overworked last season as well. It's such a good shape in terms of being able to not aggressively press all of the time, but just able to kind of pen teams in and really suffocate them, but also be secure in defensive transition as well. Also, last thing to kind of really talk about, well, a couple of things actually I wanted to talk about as well here, because you guys will notice I had Eberechi Eze on the thumbnail, and I've kind of got him down here as well. I've also got Semenyo down here as well. Let's put Bentancur back in for a sec. Let's put Romero back in for a sec as well. Where is he? Bentancur, Maddison, Solanke, Johnson. One thing, before I come on to the 5 at the back adaptability, I wanted to talk about is why the Eze signing could actually be quite important, even though it's not necessarily an obvious profile that Spurs need. That reliance on Maddison kind of as a creator, as a number 10, And with Maddison's kind of injury history, Damsgaard plays such an important part in this system. And I've realised I've not spoken about Kulusevski at all in this video either, who I think, again, is going to be super important under Frank, with that crossing ability from out wide, and that creativity that Mbeumo does give. Again, he's not got the maybe pace of Mbeumo, but he is a good finisher. And again, I think that ability to kind of come in and combine in central areas as well. If Porro does want to step up, you can see that Kulusevski-Maddison link-up that we did see at times last season. But again, I'll go back to Maddison quickly just for a sec, because it's going to be a lot of strain on Maddison's body, balancing Champions League football with Premier League football. And I think that's where Eze, bringing in a proper number 10 who can rotate with him, but also, where is he? Barry Eze can play out wide in that kind of number 10 or inside forward position, because he's done that for Palace this season in slightly a different setup as well, obviously, with the kind of three at the back playing as a left-sided number 10. But we know Eze is comfortable taking players on in these areas as well. He's not the most adept at running in behind, but again, I'm sure he could do that. I think it makes sense as a profile to add to the squad, because you're putting a lot of pressure on Maddison's body to play all those games as that number 10. And I think Eze, again, is going to thrive in these kind of central areas, that creativity, that ball-carrying ability that he does give you when Spurs do move through the thirds. He's a killer in and around that box as well, with the shots from outside the box, even though Frank doesn't necessarily tend to encourage that all the time. I think it makes sense, but also I do think Spurs need another winger as well, and maybe Semenyo I think is an option who can play on both sides as well. Again, a shot monster, which is what Mbeumo was, what Shard has kind of been. Great ball carrier as well, good presser, can dribble on both feet as well, can kind of cut in on this right hand side to get shots off like Mbeumo does, but also go around the outside and get these cutback opportunities too. So I think Semenyo definitely makes sense as a signing. But the last thing I want to talk about is Frank's ability to adapt and go back to that 5 at the back as well, which again suits the profiles in our squad. He's done a lot of talking about how against the big 6 teams, which Brentford have got such a brilliant record against, for the most part. Again, they have lost games, of course, against them, but they're notoriously hard to beat against the big 6. And Pep Guardiola has been so fruitful in his praise for Thomas Frank. He does that to a lot of managers, but Brentford obviously did the double over them in their second season, I think, in the Prem. And that was playing a 5 at the back. And again, we go to this from last season. It was predominantly a 5 kind of 3-2 or 3-5-2 with these wing-backs stepping up. And again, it's definitely something that he did like to do against the big 6. And he said that on Monday Night Football. There's a really good breakdown of that. So how do we set this up? We bring in Kevin Danso or Nathan Collins or Luka Vuskovic as well. And again, with the aerial duels one, I think Vuskovic, let's put him in there for a bit of fun and take Danso out for now. Vuskovic in there as kind of in the back 3. Romero in that right-hand side for the ball progression. Wing-backs high. Double pivot in there with Bentancur and Bergvall. And then what you do get is, if I take Kulusevski out, you've got almost a front 2 of Tell and Solanke. One thing that you could almost also do with this is take out someone like a Bergvall, and we know with Kulusevski's engine, let me just make sure I've got the right amount of players on the pitch here. 3, 4, oh no, we haven't. We're missing a player. Yeah, so get Kulusevski in there as one of those 3 midfielders. This allows you the versatility to actually change formation in-game as well. One thing that Thomas Frank spoke about in that piece on Monday Night Football against setting up in this system against teams that are going to want to be aggressive and have a lot of the ball is making sure to stop the overloads. So these guys have to really work hard because one thing that you're always vulnerable in a 5 at the back system is that switch of play. And he wants his team to be... Oh, sorry, someone's just ringing me. Super disciplined in making sure that the team shuffle over and force the team back without that space, so they're not hitting that kind of diagonal to get a 1v1 opportunity against the right-sided centre-back or the left-sided centre-back and get crosses in that way. So it's super disciplined. But also, one thing I quite like about this setup is that you've got a really good box-to-box midfielder in Bergvall. You've got Bentancur, who's good at breaking up play, although maybe you'd want a more natural 6 in there as well. You've also got Kulusevski in there, who is good defensively, good at winning duels in there, being combative, but it also allows you the freedom to change in game to more of a 3-2 or kind of a 3-2-4-1 almost with these wing backs, kind of a bit more of a double pivot. This also brings someone like an Eze into the game as well, kind of playing as more of a creator rather than an inside forward. Kulusevski as well, this is something that he thrived in under Conte a bit, but also, like I said, you can use Tell and Solanke as kind of a front two, and we know that they've got the defensive work rate to drop in as well and do exactly what Frank wants them to do in terms of stopping those overloads, being compact defensively, but also offering a threat on transition. And also as well, like, again, in this system, like, it wasn't as if they were just sitting back. They were pressing high up the pitch as well. So one player that's also going to be important to talk about in this is Archie Gray as well. And you notice here I've plopped him in the central centre-back role. And again, people are going to be a little bit scarred by seeing Gray at centre-half. But I do actually think that baptism of fire under Postecoglou last season might actually help him a little bit and might add something to Thomas Frank's ability to be tactically flexible. I'm not saying you definitely start him at centre-half, but this is a guy that Thomas Frank really wanted to sign Archie Gray at Brentford, and as he did with Johnson as well. Tried to break their transfer record twice to sign 2 players that we've signed. Went very deep with Gray as well. And I'm not saying you necessarily play him predominantly as a centre-half, but one thing you could do, again, as I just spoke about with that kind of tactical flexibility of this particular system, is that it does allow you in-game to revert to more of a traditional 4 at the back, and that allows Gray to kind of step into midfield and almost be that centre-half defensive midfield profile that Spurs need over time. I'm not saying this is something that you should definitely do next season, because whether he's ready for it or not, with the midfield performances that he's put in, again, in a rag-bag team and system towards the end of his season, probably suggests not, right? But it does allow you to do this. And then you can change Bentancur out for maybe a slightly different profile. But I do think Gray, over time, is going to be quite a big player for Frank, and he's definitely someone that he's going to want to get his teeth into and work with. But yeah, that flexibility of having Gray as almost that anchor potentially, with that experience as playing as a centre-half, allows you to just be a little bit flexible in that kind of system and that kind of shape. So something to bear in mind. That's it. I'm really excited for this to come out, you guys to see it. I'm really excited for the Frank era to start. Official confirmation will be soon. Obviously, we're sad that Andrew's gone, but I think this is a really good appointment and a really good step in the right direction for Spurs. So make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and peace.